Nobody even sets standards for these guys anymore, and they still manage to disappoint their fans. 3 consecutive first-round exits, but being eliminated from the qualifying round is what's putting the fan base into panic mode. These guys didn't even make the playoffs, and they don't have their lottery pick. In a draft with depth like the 2021 has, the Leafs are lucky their pick isn't higher. But it doesn't take away from the fact that they're at a low point right now and they're the laughing stock of the league. After what we saw in the pathetic excuse of a series against Columbus, the only players that have a spot for sure on next year's roster are Austin Matthews and John Tavares, only because of his full no movement clause. Everyone else is expendable, and it pains me to say, but it's the sad truth. The only player in the core that has played up to their contract is Matthews, who took steps forward this year to push the envelope on being an elite number 1 center, and according to some, a top 5 forward in the league. Tavares had a slower season than the previous year, and Marner has barely been able to score any points in the playoffs without the help of a power play. Nylander did bounce back this season, but the smart move would probably be to sell high on him this offseason before his value falls back down and can't get you anything worthwhile. As for the rest of the team, there's a few players that did look alright over the past few games, and they're the same ones who typically leave it all on the ice game in and game out. Zach Hyman didn't have the best series, but he's a key piece in the Leafs' top 6, and he's the type of player that the Leafs need more of. Morgan Rielly and Jake Muzzin are 2 solid defensemen, and they were carrying the Leafs blue line before Muzzin got stretchered off the ice with just under 2 minutes to go. Kerfoot was also not bad throughout the series, considering he had 1 less assist than Marner, and he gets paid $7.4 million less than him. The fourth line of Clifford, Engvall, and Spezza also stepped it up from Game 2 onwards, and they got rewarded with extra ice time. It's a shame when one of the best things to come out of this return to play process for your team is that your fourth line was solid. They won't win you NHL games by themselves because the Leafs clearly can't even do that with their first line. After the awful showing we saw, the bright spots on this team are few and far between, with Robertson being the last of the skill the Marlies have to offer. Seriously, after this kid, Rasmus Sandin, and Timothy Liljegren, the Leafs have pretty much milked their farm team dry, and they haven't done anything to restock their supply lately. They love throwing away second-round picks away every trade deadline for old guys to play center on the fourth line instead of actually addressing a need like, I don't know, maybe defense. The Leafs management has thrown away 2 second-round picks at guys like Brian Boyle and Turtleneck Boy for a combined 51 games, including playoffs, in which they didn't make it past the first round. Surprise, surprise. Because they traded their first-round pick to Carolina this year in return for dumping Marlowe's salary, they don't even get the 13th overall pick in a draft class that's supposed to be filled with talent. At the 13th spot, the Leafs could have picked Braden Schneider, who is a right-handed defenseman, but they had to make a bad trade to free themselves from the cap restraints they've imposed on themselves by investing $40 million into 4 players. And by no means is the 13th pick in the 2020 draft supposed to save the Leafs, because they have a lot of other issues that need to be addressed first. The biggest being the defense. The most glaring liability on the blue line is Cody Ceci, but luckily he'll be leaving this offseason. Although he sucked the whole year, acquiring for Nikita Zaitsev allowed the Leafs to get out of a bad contract at the end of the season. Once he walks, the Leafs get $4.5 million freed up, so that's a blessing. Tyson Berry has definitely played his last game as a Toronto Maple Leaf. To say he disappointed this year was an understatement. Blame it on Babcock all you want, but he wasn't the coach all season. Tyson Berry was brutal defensively all season, and he didn't get better in the series against the Blue Jackets. And for someone whose strength was supposed to be their offensive upside, he provided absolutely nothing besides shooting pucks into shin pads. Again and again and again. Toronto would be stupid to bring him back because he clearly isn't the answer on the right side. As much as I want Dermott to stay in Toronto, I'm not sure it's going to happen. If he gets extended, anything over $2 million, which is what Justin Hall is making, would be clearly overpaying him. If he holds out on a contract, then ship him off to a rebuilder for some picks. They might be able to use him. I don't think Martin Marincin should see NHL ice ever again, at least not for a team that's supposed to be a contender. His reaction when he scored his only goal says a lot about him, mainly that he doesn't do this often. Justin Hall made a career for himself during the first half of the season, then tailed off after he signed his contract extension on New Year's Eve. The same can be said about Pierre Engvall after signing his contract midway through the season. The guy was invisible, and it showed when he was a healthy scratch for the first game of the qualifying round, and the only reason he got to play in the rest of the games is because Frederic Gauthier was garbage. Him and Marty shouldn't be in playoff games on a contending team, which the Leafs love to think of themselves as. God bless Ilya Mikheyev. The guy worked so hard to rehab his wrist in the months off before the Columbus series, and he was even nominated the MVP of the Leafs intra-squad exhibition games. What game-breaking numbers will he put up? Nothing. This guy did absolutely nothing. He even got demoted from Tavares wing to the third line and made them worse. Maybe the Leafs weren't going hard on him in camp, but the second a Blue Jacket made contact with him, he became useless. Kasperi Kapanen acts like a boss, but he never backs up his cocky personality with his play on the ice. Yeah, he's fast, but he doesn't really do much else besides throwing the odd hit, which instantly makes him more aggressive than the majority of the roster. And Freddie, oh Freddie, as much as people ragged on you all season and in the series last year against Boston, you actually had a decent showing against Columbus this year. Too bad the only thing people will remember about it is the weak goal you let Foodie score. Anderson has 1 year left as a Leaf before he hits the market, and I can honestly say I wouldn't mind him walking, as long as we have a goalie that can replace him. Don't get me wrong, he's by no means terrible, but he's just good. Re-signing players and still needing to upgrade the roster is what's going to harm the Leafs the most. Now that we know the cap isn't going to increase, the Leafs are entering the depths of cap hell. This is exactly what management deserves when they go and spend $6.6 million on two third-liners with little experience and barely any points for 3 to 4 years each. And they don't even show up when it counts. I know Johnsson only played one game, but they might as well have just left Robertson in the lineup, unless they were playing him in his last game as a Leaf. Whatever the case is, having $10 million invested in your third line when you already have $40 million invested in your top 4 forwards is stupid. If the Leafs want to fix their issues, they need to improve the glaring weakness on the blue line that they ice every night. Riley and Muzzin are great defensemen, but considering the injuries they face this season, it wouldn't be a bad idea to get another guy to slot into that number 2 spot, especially if he's right-handed. Berry just clearly isn't that guy that in Toronto, and it's a shame to see. Mikko Lehtonen is supposedly the Finnish Bobby Orr, so if he does end up lighting it up next year, then Dubas would look like a genius. The Leafs do have Dermott and Hall, which would be an alright bottom pairing, and hopefully under the correct circumstances, Travis Dermott can grow into the top 4 defenseman he was touted to be. Rasmus Sandin should definitely become a permanent fixture on the roster next year, and it will be exciting to watch him grow after his NHL debut this year. Hopefully Liljegren can come into the lineup soon, but I'm not sure how good he will end up being. Honestly, if the Leafs top 6 ends up being Riley, Lehtonen, Muzzin, Sandin, Dermott, and Hall, I don't think they're far out from having a solid defense core, assuming Mikko Lehtonen lives up to the praise surrounding him. If you were to further bolster the Leafs defense though, some moves surrounding offense would have to be made. The Big Four take up almost $40 million in cap space, which adds up to just under 43% of the cap, locked up in 4 forwards that can't score in elimination games. This lack of ability to do addition is going to make it hard for Dubas to build a cup-contending team. What they're going to need to do is sell off their young depth pieces that they're overpaying for. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant one is today. Selling high on Johnsson would have been easy, but the Leafs will have to settle on a smaller return after his injury-riddled season. Although I like Clifford in the qualifying round, if the Leafs were to re-sign him, they'd have to give a 2021 second-rounder to the Kings, and I don't know if it's even worth it. The Leafs need grit in their lineup, but at what cost? The Kings were paying half of his salary this season, meaning that if he were to get a raise next season, the Leafs would lose over $1 million against the cap, and they'd have to give up a second-rounder. Just sign a guy for league minimum and put a bonus in his contract for winning 5 fights or something. Jason Spezza should be returning, and rightfully so. He played hard all season and revived the Leafs season in Game 4 against the Jackets. Spezza is a great veteran leader, and he plays with heart, and the same can't be said for all of the Leafs roster, so they should keep him. The bold statement that many fans have been saying is to trade Marner or Nylander for a defenseman. It's not even such a crazy idea. Marner works hard on the ice, but the only time he produced was in the last 4 minutes of regulation in Game 4. The same can be said for Nylander, except he doesn't look like he's trying when he's on the ice. Willie doesn't look like he's dialed in during games, and it hurts the team sometimes. His offensive upside is great, but he's a liability in the defensive zone. The Leafs trading him for an elite right-handed defenseman would be the ideal situation, but those type of trades don't come about every day. I would hope that Dubas attempts to shop Nylander this offseason and isn't haunted by his own words.
We can and we will.
Why promise that to a group of 4 players you're allocating half of your budget to? Are you stupid? He even told reporters that he believes Cody Ceci is a good player based off of his information, so his sanity should be questioned. Anyone who has been associated with the Leafs should have their sanity questioned. Insanity is doing something over and over and expecting a different result. The Leafs lose in the first round every year, this year being worse, and Leaf fans expect a different result, myself included. Arguably worse than the believers are those who have lost faith in this team. I knew Toronto was going to win in Game 4 just so their inevitable loss in an elimination game would get to happen. It's sad to see happen, but this is what happens when you tell everyone you're a championship caliber team and continue to implode year after year in the playoffs. You've talked the talk and now it's time to walk the walk. Oh, and I forgot to mention,